Why do you think it's been like this?
It's a huge question. I think one way of explaining it, I can think of a couple of levels of explaining how we got here. One is that most Christians who read Revelation, they might know Daniel. The second half of Daniel reads a lot like Revelation, and Revelation depends on Daniel for a lot of its language and symbols. But otherwise, Revelation is different. We're not used to thinking of Revelation. When I teach it to seminarians, I have them read books like parts of First Enoch or parts of Fourth Ezra, or just to get
That's
across.
blasphemy. Wait,
Yeah,
no.
just to get across.
That a Christian and a particular dispensationalist, maybe, and maybe you could help us understand, all that to say, a particular view and an interpretation of Revelation among several, that has been highlighted, that has been, essentially lifted up and favored. And then that one in this massive ecosystem, like you said, left behind. These movies that then became movies and all the different, like almost lore around this idea of the rapture and these things and people predicting it and all this end time fervor and around this book of Revelation, that now some people are like, it's driving policy. Now, I don't need you to speak on that unless you want to. You're certainly welcome to. But let's pull on the string. What did he mean by soon?
Yeah, I think John meant, and this will come back to a comment you made earlier, a question you asked earlier. I think John meant that followers of Jesus could conquer, could prevail over Rome. And maybe even in their lifetimes, if they didn't die during the conflict, experience the reign of God on earth, right? The New Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth, which is what happens in Revelation, right? The New Jerusalem comes here. Nobody goes to heaven. The New Jerusalem comes here. I should back up. Martyrs go to heaven first. But anyway, that's a footnote.
Yes.
It's a distraction. So anyway, it is interested in the conquest, and it does describe it as violent. But what's interesting about Revelation is it never calls Jesus' followers to take up arms. And even though Jesus is a warrior, as you pointed out, Josh, he's a lamb, and he has one weapon. You mentioned his sword. But his sword comes out of his mouth.
Yes.
He is in Revelation. This is Revelation's language. He's the faithful witness. He's the one who speaks the truth, and he dies, and he's risen, and he will come and conquer with the sword of his mouth. I think we can look at moments in history when the truth itself provokes violent responses.
Yes.
And in this case, Revelation tells its audience, Revelation says, they conquered through the blood of their lamb and the word of their testimony.
Yes.
They didn't love their lives even to the point of death, as a way of describing how the lamb's followers prevail.
And so, can I test a theory with you?
Sure. I know what I want, and I just try to be transparent about it. And I try to give the best argument I can for it. And I know that...
what else can you do?
I call it optimistic reading, is what I call it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always addressed it like, it's like, do people want, like, everyone to be judged? Like, I get it. Like, for me, like, I'm not God. I don't get to would relish in judgment of other people. They would relish that they would be somehow consigned to an eternity of torment.
Yes.
And it's like, why would you relish in that? I mean, I understand justice, and I understand things have been done that are horrific. And I'm not trying to make light of any of that. But most of the people I know, that's not about this person deserves justice because they've been through some horrific thing. Most people I know, it's just they don't really like that person. They deserve to go to hell. Well, hey there, guys. Welcome to another episode of the Faith Roundtable, where we talk to all sorts of experts and scholars, theologians, leaders, thought leaders around America to talk about what's happening to the church in America and even beyond, but we focus here on what's happening in America and try to understand the theology that's out there right now. And today I'm super excited to be able to have Greg Carey on the show. He's the Associate Dean for the Lancaster, I guess that's what if that's in there, Lancaster campus, and Professor of New Testament for the Moravian University School of Theology. He's as a New Testament scholar, he specializes in apocalyptic literature, the book of Revelation, and public biblical interpretation. And we are here to talk about his new book from Eerdmans, Rereading Revelation, Theology, Ethics, and Resistance. Thank you for jumping on the program with us today.
I am happy to be here, Josh. It's been fun just even warming up for the conversation.
Well, I'm so glad to hear that. So I got to ask you, what made you crazy enough to write a commentary on Revelation? I just don't, I didn't think, you didn't seem like someone who loved pain and torture.
No, I don't love pain and torture.
I'm just wondering why'd you do this? What inspired you to write?
You know, it goes all the way back to grad school. So I finished grad school in the mid-90s. And one of my professors, Marianne Talbert, suggested I write on Revelation. And I kind of got into it with a seminar paper and just kept working on it. So that means I've been working on it for 30-something years now.
Wow.
Still learning. And I think there's just so much about Revelation that is more interesting than is out there in popular church talk. I continue to be fascinated with it.
I love that. You know, as I was reviewing your book for this interview, and the thing that strikes me is that this is fun. It's not like your normal Revelation commentary. Someone might think it's verse by verse, right? Going through everything, but that's not what it is. You've done something different in those regards. And it's almost like you're equipping contemporary Christians to do what? What is it that you want us to do with this Revelation?
Yeah. Thank you. You're right. It's not a commentary. I would be terrified if somebody asked me to write a verse by verse commentary on Revelation. I mean, what do you do with this symbol or that symbol? And,
my word.
Yeah, no, you know, and there are, 800-page commentaries out there. That's not what I want to do. You know, I'm late in my career, Josh. I'm 60, and I've been working on Revelation, published essays and all that. This book is really me saying, these are the things about Revelation that I want to offer the world while I have the chance. And so they're all focused on some aspect of theology or discipleship. Faithful politics is certainly a dimension of what that's all about. I had to make a choice about whether I was writing for a very general, broad audience or for people who had some background in biblical studies. And the book is more for that second group. I think most people could read the book and understand it, but it does have footnotes and it does talk about arguments scholars have with each other.
And I think I love that. And I think one of the things that I feel even like a sense of call to is to be able to take, and there are a lot of people that have felt this, but I feel like I'm amongst them, is to take very like scholarly work and the amazing work that's done on that level and make it transferable and translatable to more general audiences. Because the work that's done is so important and we miss it, I think, because of this language gap sometimes, and maybe because of the echo chambers or the lack of funding or the, whatever it is, the marketing that isn't there. But this is the kind of stuff that people need to hear. And I'll throw out something that I'd love to get your thoughts on, this idea of the counter-imperial witness.
Yes.
That is so clear within Revelation. Now, people are going to hear that like, what? Counter-imperial? What are you talking about? What do you mean? And they might not even see themselves at all. And I would love for you to paint the picture. What do we mean counter-imperial in John's day, the writer of Revelation? And how does that translate for us today?
To respond to that question, Josh, I won't be long-winded, I promise, but it takes a couple of steps before we get there.
Be as long-winded as you need to be, or one.
One part of it is that there's this big gap between scholars of Revelation and what a lot of people have consumed through Christian media over a period of decades, right? So my mom read all the Left Behind novels. She never read any of my books. So she was proud, but yeah. So almost all scholars of Revelation agree on two basic things. The first is that it really was written to address its own time and place, followers of Jesus then and there. It uses the word soon in chapter 1. It uses the word soon in chapter 22 at the end of the book.
Right.
After chapter 1, it addresses 7, I like to call them assemblies, just to remind us they weren't churches the way we think about churches.
Right.
Pastors didn't have a housing allowance, right? But it's addressing their situation and their struggles. So those are the two steps I'd have to say before. And then almost all scholars, it's liberal, conservative, secular, Catholic, Protestant, it really doesn't matter. Almost all interpreters agree that what Revelation is concerned about is, what does it mean to be faithful to Jesus in a culture that's dominated by Rome? And people might tend to forget that Rome came with religion, right? That there's imperial religion and popular religion. And
civic religion, one might even
completely, thank you. You're helping me. Civic religion. And it's a part of being patriotic in that world, to be religious in a particular way. And it means that there are imperial gods, that the emperor can be worshipped, that Rome can be worshipped. Conquest. If you have Nike shoes, Nike means conquest, victory, right? Nike is a goddess in the ancient world. And so, at all levels of life, it was a religious world. And these followers of Jesus have to figure out how to relate to that world, not just religiously, but also to the violence, the misinformation, and the exploitation that the Roman Empire was about. And that seems to be at the heart of the book, how to respond to that faithfully.
I really, really, really love that. One of the things you talk about is how it's like resistance literature, literature, and it unmasks idolatrous power. What does that mean, that it's resistance literature, and how does it unmask this idolatrous power?
Yeah, if I could, I'll start with the second part.
Please.
So the first word of the book of Revelation is apocalypsis, which means revelation, or like unveiling. If it's a wedding night, the man would literally unveil the bride and see her face maybe for the first time. So what Revelation does is it uses symbols and story, almost a kind of poetry, to pull the veil off of Rome. Rome looks glorious. It looks invincible. In Revelation 13:4, who is like the beast? Who can fight against it? In chapter 18, saw her and I was greatly amazed. And what Revelation wants to say is this empire is a monster or a beast. It's idolatrous. It's violent. It's exploitative. It will punish you if you don't align. And that is what it is. And so I would just add the one other thing is Revelation isn't the only book like that ancient Jews and Christians produced. We have a bunch. And they tend to work the same way. They tend to be politically involved. And so in that sense, Revelation is resisting Rome by countering Rome's message about itself and also calling believers to a pattern of behavior that's going to be resistance to.
I just think it's so, just that one slight, and maybe it's not slight, but just that one idea, this is resistance literature. That changes so much about how you read this, because we tend to, if I may, growing up, Revelation, it was a triumphalistic view, meaning we are conquering our enemies. We didn't define enemies, by the way, too much. We're conquering them, though. I mean, there's very violent imagery, right, in this. Even I can think of pastors that would say, and I used to preach this, and honestly, I used to preach this in a little bit to my own, I feel a little bit, I don't know if ashamed is the right word, but I feel a bit uncomfortable that I used to preach this, and I would say, Jesus only came in peace once.
Yeah.
He only came in peace once.
Yeah.
He comes as a warrior soaked in blood, ready to devour his enemies the second time. That's essentially what I taught people. And the idea being, you get grace now, but be careful, because Jesus is going to come back, and when he comes back, he's got a big freaking sword, And if you're not on the right side of that, you're getting slaughtered.
I'm sure I understood Revelation the same way, Josh.
Yes. And that's how I viewed it. But then, wait, this is resistance literature. These aren't the conquerors that it's talking. These are those who have been conquered. And how do they work through this? And it's unbelievable how that changes like your view. Instead of the view of the victor, like even the idea of the lamb who has been slain, right? This Davidic view of all this amazing like vision, and then it turns around, it's the lamb that's been slain. That's who is the victor. And it's like, oh my word, but we don't think about it that way. Why do you think, okay, so why do you think there's such violence? You kind of overlap to that, but why is there such violence and fantastic imagery in this, in Revelation? And why do you think people have interpreted it so much as, well, like those bugs or whatever, locusts or helicopters, or we're in this, or we had someone on Faithful Politics, and God bless him. And he had, and again, I don't think he's correct, but I'm willing to listen to his argument. But he was convinced that America was prophesied in Revelation. He was convinced about it. What do we do with this stuff? Why do you think it's been like this?
It's a huge question. I think one way of explaining it, I can think of a couple of levels of explaining how we got here. One is that most Christians who read Revelation, they might know Daniel. The second half of Daniel reads a lot like Revelation. Right. And Revelation depends on Daniel for a lot of its language and symbols. But otherwise, Revelation is different. We're not used to thinking of Revelation. When I teach it to seminarians, I have them read books like parts of First Enoch or parts of Fourth Ezra, or right, just to get across.
That's blasphemy. Wait,
yeah,
no,
just to get across. No, as context, right, to understand that there's other Jewish and Christian literature that has the same tendencies and concerns, and we can read it and kind of make a context for it and make sense out of it. So that's part of it. I think the other part is there came a time in our cultural history when we really started preferring technological linear kind of logic. To get nerdy for 5 seconds, what we called Scottish common sense philosophy.
Yes.
And so what you would do with a book like Revelation, this is poetry, but you could translate poetry and turn it into a historical scenario with milestones and all of that. And that became, it's not that Christians hadn't done it some throughout history, but it became what some Christians did in the 18th century and 20th century and into today. And because it's been so popular, especially in the UK and the United States more than anywhere else, because it's been so popular to most people, they just assume that's what Revelation's about. I don't think it is. I think if you actually were to try to take Revelation literally, you'd take it seriously when it says these are the things that are about to happen soon.
So let's pull on that thread a little bit. So again, what are we up against right now? Well, we're up against a massive, metaphorically speaking, up against a massive media ecosystem that a Christian and a particular dispensationalist maybe, and maybe you could help us understand, all that to say, a particular view and an interpretation of Revelation among several. That has been highlighted. That has been, essentially lifted up and favored. And then that one in this massive ecosystem, like you said, left behind. These movies that then became movies and all the different, like almost lore around this idea of the rapture and these things and people predicting it and all this end time fervor and fur around this book of Revelation that now some people are like, it's driving policy.
It may.
Now, I don't need you to speak on that unless you want to. You're certainly welcome to. But let's pull on the string. What did he mean by soon?
Yeah, I think John meant, and this will come back to a comment you made earlier, a question you asked earlier. I think John meant that followers of Jesus could conquer, could prevail over Rome. and maybe even in their lifetimes, if they didn't die during the conflict, experience the reign of God on earth, right? The New Jerusalem coming down from heaven to earth, which is what happens in Revelation, right? The New Jerusalem comes here. Nobody goes to heaven. The New Jerusalem comes here. I should back up. Martyrs go to heaven first. But anyway, that's a footnote.
Yes.
It's a distraction. So anyway, it is interested in the conquest, and it does describe it as violent. But what's interesting about Revelation is it never calls Jesus' followers to take up arms. And even though Jesus is a warrior, as you pointed out, Josh, he's a lamb, and he has one weapon. You mentioned his sword, but his sword comes out of his mouth.
Yes.
He is in Revelation. This is Revelation's language. He's the faithful witness. He's the one who speaks the truth, and he dies, and he's risen, and he will come and conquer with the sword of his mouth. You know, I think we can look at moments in history when the truth itself provokes violent responses.
Yes.
And in this case, Revelation tells its audience, Revelation says, you know, they conquered through the blood of their lamb and the word of their testimony.
Yes.
They didn't love their lives even to the point of death, as a way of describing how the lamb's followers prevail.
And so, can I test a theory with you?
Sure.
It's this idea, and I've seen this a few different places, but I'm wondering if it fits here well. It's this idea that, you know, what Jesus did, Paul describes it, I guess, in Colossians. I know there's debate if Paul wrote Colossians or not, but I'll just say, for the sake of argument, Paul wrote Colossians. That is what I believe, but Paul wrote Colossians, and he says that the powers, right? Jesus made a spectacle of the powers. And it was almost like this idea that the most innocent man in the world came, and the best of the justice systems of the time condemned him. And if the best of the world has to offer condemns the most innocent man, what does that say about the systems of the world? It's exposing the corruption.
It's a revelation.
It's a revelation.
It's a revelation.
Is that same kind of thing happening, you feel, in the book of Revelation?
Well, first, yes. And for me, one of the key moments in Revelation is when you meet the Lamb as the Lamb for the first time. It happens in chapter 5. John has traveled up into the throne room where God resides on the throne, and there are heavenly beings around. And he notices the one on the throne has a scroll that's sealed with 7 seals. We find out later, once the scroll gets unrolled, that's the fate of the world, right? And he's grieving because no one can be found who's worthy to open the scroll. And he hears a heavenly voice. Look, the Lion of Judah is worthy. He can open the lion, right? Yes. And you think lion and you think ferocity, violence, domination, terror. And he says, I look, and you never hear about the lion again. The lion never shows up. He sees this lamb, this bizarre looking lamb standing, having been slaughtered. And it's the lamb who can begin to unroll the fate of the world. To me, and I'll be transparent, there are scholars who would disagree with me strongly. I think it's about 50-50. To me, this scene is saying the way God is going to work through Jesus is not violent. It's just like you described, by being faithful and righteous and true. And that is the way God is going to do it. So I'm not picking on how you used to preach. Look, I bought into all that too. I've been there, but I think we had it really wrong about how God's power works in the world. If Jesus is who he seemed to be, the way the Gospels portray Jesus, the way Paul interprets Jesus, he is not about dominating. He is about loving and serving and building. Revelation says this kingdom of priests.
Yes. People who are serving as what? What's the significance of that? The kingdom of priests. They're God's, they're the bridge. They're helping. Why are we a kingdom of priests?
Yeah, it is fascinating language, but the priests are the ones who perform the acts that for Israelites would connect Israel to God. I mean, you had priests all over the ancient world. Every cult had priests.
Right.
But the idea, it wasn't that they were morally special. They didn't do pastoral care. They didn't do funerals, right? They performed the prayers and sacrifices and rituals that created a link between the people and God.
I think that's really a beautiful image, that we get to become like the lamb, right? And it's amazing how we focus on the lion, because I'll be honest, I have heard at least as much or more about Jesus as the Lion of the tribe of Judah than I've heard about him as the Lamb of God.
Which is a verse from Isaiah. I believe it's Isaiah 9. What Revelation is doing there is taking that verse, I think, and John, the author of Revelation, knew the scriptures in an incredibly deep way. He's almost scholarly about how he alludes to certain books of the Bible. So when he uses that image, he knows he's taking an image from Isaiah. There's no question about it. And then he says, but this is how God's power works. If I may, one of the big questions early Christians had to answer was, if Jesus was really the Messiah, why didn't it look like he was good at it? If he's died and been raised, the Romans are still here, sickness and death are still here. What they came to appreciate looking back is it's the resurrection that reveals who Jesus is to them. But it doesn't change Jesus' character.
I really, really, really appreciate that. There's one thing about Revelation, and when I was looking at what you were, again, reviewing the book, that we see these visions, right? And they're so fantastical. They're just so bizarre. There's so many things in them. And then, of course, it makes it open to all sorts of crazy interpretations that have come out about this. But what do these visions press? Like, you talk about how they press practical ethics, things like allegiance, things like economics, things like sexuality and gender, things like truthful worship, even as much or more maybe than eschatology, what's going to happen in the end. Can you talk a little bit more about that? Why this focus on ethical? Like, how do we know that they're focusing on ethics? I guess what's the argument for our audience to understand? And then how does that imbalance maybe instruct us on how to interpret?
I do think Revelation's ethics are a little bit narrow in the sense that it doesn't tell you how to do business, how to raise your kids, anything about marriage and family, anything about
15 steps to the perfect marriage, or 12 steps.
Not that kind of ethics. But what it's asking of the Jesus people in these assemblies is really dramatic and hard. So for years, I've used this image with my students. Imagine you lived in Ephesus, a city in southwest Turkey today. That's the first one addressed in Revelation. Top 3 city in the Roman Empire. You know, you can go there and be amazed by what you see. Imagine you're a stonemason. Okay. And you can make a living. If you want to make a living as a stonemason, you have to be in the stonemasons guild. Now, okay. They might even cover your burial experiences. Seriously, they meet, they look after each other, they get each other business. But if you meet with the stonemasons, you are going to have, just like if you go to Rotary Club in the United States, there will be a prayer, probably a sacrifice and hymns to the patron god of the stonemasons. So if you're a follower of Jesus, can you do that?
Right.
Can you work on the building projects, so many of which had religious, actually were basically temples? And if you don't do that and stay with the stonemasons and do those things, what happens to you and your household? Like, how do you survive? Nobody's referring business to you. And Revelation is saying, Revelation 18:4, get out of there, come out. It's asking for an extremely high level of purity in terms of relating to the trappings of Rome. And you see in those 7 letters that there are other prophets in the churches besides John who disagree with him. Well, we can't interview them, but he gives them nicknames, right? Balaam, the Nicolaitans, Jezebel. And our best guess is that they were probably saying something that sounds like Paul in 1 Corinthians 8, it doesn't matter. These things aren't real. So I don't think Paul thought it totally didn't matter, but
Right.
That's a different conversation. It could sound that way. John says, no, it matters infinitely. You just cannot participate in the system. I think that's a pretty narrow ethic, but I could go on and talk about how Revelation critiques that world. But I think the basic thing is don't participate in this idolatrous, exploitative cultural system.
So is that that's the basic ethical message of the book of Revelation, is calling God's people out of essentially the corruption of the human system that they're in?
The question I ask, yes. You ask a direct question, you deserve yes, no, sort of. Yes. I think when we read Paul, we ask what's going on in Paul's context. What are the problems
Yes.
I think we should read Revelation the same way. And so rather than just downloading it, I just guess I got to take all my money out of the bank and I'm not going to pay taxes anymore because I don't like this thing or that thing. I think, the way I like to ask the question is, what's beastly in our culture? So beastly that we can't compromise with it.
I really like that question, actually.
Yeah. And so I don't think Revelation tells us what to do. It gives us questions that are really hard to ask, that no other book in the New Testament asks in that same pressing way. What's worthy of your life? What are you willing to say? This is the absolute truth. I cannot compromise it.
That is such a more helpful way to read the book than trying to think and imagine and predict all the ways, the things that are going to happen and whatever it is. It's just such a more helpful way. Now, because I do want to talk a little bit about some of these other ethical issues in there, but let's talk about eschatology.
Yes.
It's been seen as this eschatological book, meaning final time, right? So for people that it's the end time, study of end times, this time when God will, right every wrong, judge good and evil, all that kind of stuff, just to simply put it. What does, in your opinion, in your study, educated opinion, what does it tell us about eschatology, about the end times, if anything?
I think you're right that, you said earlier, Revelation isn't about eschatology, but it certainly has an eschatological view. It's not a detailed scenario, I don't think. I don't think you can make a chart of it. But I'll just call attention to a few parts of it. Part of the eschatology isn't just about time, it's about space. What I mean by that is God is in heaven and God is on the throne, and the Lamb shares the throne, and it is their world. So the other thing that means is, and they are going to make it right. So at the end of Revelation, the New Jerusalem comes down like the Lamb's bride, and human beings dwell in it. It's full of fruit and fresh water. There's an end to injustice and suffering. There's peace and worship and beauty. And that is what God is about. Along the way, the dragon, Satan, gets defeated. The beast monster gets destroyed. Those who follow the beast are gone. And yet, and this is something I'm not resolved about. I know what I want. I don't know what's true.
That's fair.
What I want, there's some evidence for, the gates of that New Jerusalem are still open, and people from every tribe and language and people group and ethnicity come into the New Jerusalem bringing their gifts. There's some of Revelation that is hopeful that God is going to redeem everything and everybody, but it's a lot easier to read Revelation. No, they're just out. Done away with. I know what I want, and I just try to be transparent about it. And I try to give the best argument I can for it. And I know that...
what else can you do?
I call it optimistic reading, is what I call it.
Yeah, I mean, I've always addressed it like, it's like, do people want, like, everyone to be judged? Like, I get it. Like, for me, like, I'm not God. I don't get and when my views don't determine what's true. If I don't like this or that biblical concept because it makes me uncomfortable, that doesn't make it true or not. And if the culture, I think, expand that, multiply that, whatever, by whatever you'd want. If that kind of bad understanding is around, which we've seen historically time and time again, a lot of people can have the wrong view. And so I don't know, but it's like, it almost is like, sometimes it feels like there are Christians that relish, well, I know there are, but like way more than I would like to see, that would relish in judgment of other people. They would relish that they would be somehow consigned to an eternity of torment.
Yes.
And it's like, why would you relish in that? I mean, I understand justice, and I understand things have been done that are horrific. And I'm not trying to make light of any of that.
Mm-mm.
But most of the people I know, that's not about this person deserves justice because they've been through some horrific thing. Most people I know, it's just they don't really like that person. They deserve to go to hell. And it's like, what a horrible way of viewing people.
I can't imagine a Christian in particular wanting someone else's destruction, which is different than, yes, I can understand why a Christian might believe in eternal punishment. I understand that.
Yes.
That's different from understanding why someone might want it.
Yes, I absolutely agree with that.
I will say in Revelation, there's this moment in that heavenly place where under the throne are the souls of the martyrs.
Yes.
And they cry out, "How long, O God, before you avenge our blood?"
Huh. So what does that mean? What are the interpretations of that?
I think almost everybody that I'm aware of as a scholar understands that as a desire for vengeance. It comes from the martyrs, right? And they have that desire. And I think there are elements of that desire in Revelation. I don't share that outlook, but if I'm going to be honest, I think it's there.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. So when it comes to something like, or is there anything else you wanted to say on that?
I have one.
A different topic. Yeah, please.
One great book about Revelation from the 1980s is by Alan Boesak, a Black South African anti-apartheid activist. He's tortured, imprisoned. And he writes Revelation from that experience. And he has this line. It's one of the few lines of scholarship I can almost repeat. It's very close to, if Christ's cloak is splattered with blood, it's the blood of his enemies and those who oppress his children. And when I read that, I feel, one, I don't like it.
Sure.
And two, if Alan Boesak is in the room, I'm not going to tell him he's wrong. You know, I haven't had that experience. I'm not going to tell him he's wrong.
Right. It's like, yeah, when you've gone through such a horrific experience, that need for justice. And that is one of those things that is kind of like, for me, it's the most convincing thing that there is some kind of like place of some kind of punishment. You know, besides just, I've grown up, you know, I never did a thorough examination of hell. I never like looked at the theological differences and the interpretations until recently. I didn't know. I grew up and your parents tell you, hey, this is real, and you believe it. And it sounds horrible. You don't want to be there. Heaven gates and hell's flames, dude. Satan and his demons are dragging you down into hell. You don't want to be a part of that. I know I didn't want to be a part of that. And so now I've had that view of hell, that heaven's gates, hell's flames. I've left that behind. I don't know what I'm replacing it with, just to be totally frank with you, but I've left that behind. But one of the things though of like, hell seems like it is a very real concept in the Bible. You do have to work with it. It can't be just, I don't like it. That's why it's not true. And so I'm trying to think through, how do I really approach this? And it's like, it's a tough one. But that idea that judgment, like there are certain things, there are certain actions, right? Which I think all of us believe. We just need to go to something like slavery, something like apartheid, like you're saying, something like Jim Crow, something like torture, something that, whatever it is that we want. There are things that we're like, that is wrong, and justice should be done in that situation. And those kinds of things that does have me hold on and think like I don't know. It's one of the strongest arguments, I think, for something like a hell that we see, that as it's traditionally thought about, at least in the way I grew up with it, was this idea that God is not going to let all these injustices just go. I don't know. What are your thoughts on that?
First, I feel a lot like you do. Wrestle with it. I will say there's a lot less hell in the Bible than I was told back in the day.
Yeah, that's probably
Gospel of
true,
John
yes.
doesn't have any of it. Paul never talks about hell.
Mm,
You know, we think he does. He talks about
right,
destruction.
right. So different Greek words is what you're saying, right? Different Greek words, different Greek
Right.
ideas.
Hades isn't hell.
Yeah, it's the place of the dead, right?
Everybody in Greek thought, everybody. So that's part of it. The other thing I would say is the idea of hell the way we have it is really absent from the Jewish scriptures, our Old Testament. It starts to
Right.
emerge with Daniel. You might disagree with me on this, so I'm just, not arguing, just talking.
Please. I don't know, to do it.
Most scholars think it's the last book of the Hebrew Bible to have been written. And remember, it has that apocalyptic dimension. There's a foreign empire oppressing the Jews, and the Son of Man is going to come and make things right. And it comes close to using that kind of imagery. We start to see it in some of the Jewish literature running up those last couple of centuries before the time of Jesus. And then it's pretty normal in a lot of Judaism and then in early Christianity. But, these ideas are still being worked out in that period. And you see different outlooks to these questions, even within the New Testament. So that gives me some room to say, I trust that God is good and fair. It also makes me fear God, not because I'm afraid God's going to send me to hell. I literally never worry about it. What I'm afraid of is God's going to reveal the truth of my life to me. And I love to think I'm a good person, but
I hear you.
I do not want to watch that movie.
Me neither. And I completely hear you. And I don't, even probably already what I've said, I'll be canceled by whoever, because I don't relish the idea of someone being tortured forever and for all eternity. I know that's sarcastic, but I'm not making a statement about its existence, because I do think it exists and I do think it's a biblical concept we have to work through. But just like anything, definitions are important.
Yes.
And we need to be honest about what is said and what isn't. And it actually our concept looks a lot more to me like the Norse, what is it? The Norse idea, and Viking idea of hell, literally
like
called hell. Like Valhalla versus hell, and then all the thieves and the terrible people, they go to hell and whatever. It's like, it just seems more like that than it is any biblical concept that we have. So with our last few minutes though, I mean, I'll kind of move. And just for anyone who's going to take this out of context, I'm not saying hell doesn't exist. Don't misquote me. Anyway. Okay. So actually listen to the context of what I'm saying, but I would love to talk a little bit about gender and power.
Yeah.
All right. So those are huge topics. They're all over the place. You have, on the one hand, of course, we have guys in the spectrum here in America that would just as soon their wives not vote. Literally, that I've seen those kinds of proposals.
Yes, sir.
And then on the other side, like a total, let's get rid of family, let's get rid of all gender distinction, no sex distinction, no gender distinction, all this kind of stuff. So this is our modern situation. What was going on back then? What are the gender power issues that were happening, and how can they instruct us right now?
Best we can tell, in the biblical world, the Greco-Roman world, people did gender differently. They thought, first of all, it was a very patriarchal world. It was. And so it was unquestioned that women would be subordinate to some man, whether it's a father or a husband. Though we also have records,
something like that.
I'm sorry?
Oldest brother or something like that, if the father, like some male.
But we have records of women being the head of the synagogue or a patron to some society. Even in the Gospels, there are wealthy, independent women.
Yes.
Paul names some of them who are like running his ministry, funding his ministry.
Right.
Okay. So it's not as simple as just that, but it was a patriarchal world. The other thing that's different is they thought of gender more as a spectrum than an on-off switch. So what I mean by that is a man could be more masculine, more manly, or less.
Yeah.
So ancient free men, because slavery was huge, would do anything just about to demonstrate their masculinity in traditional ways. Their posture, their physique, their voice, their ability to command and control. Those were all considered masculine traits.
And would that increase dignitas or that honor or whatever?
Yeah. And you can lose honor, right? You can run away in a battle or fail to speak up, or in the ancient world, right? And they had a more fluid notion of sexuality. I'm not trying to make some argument for modern ethics.
Sure.
It was common for a man we would think of as straight, married with children, to have sex with a lot of people.
It's amazing.
And they could include prostitutes who could be male or female. They could include
and no one
enslaved
had an
people.
Issue with that.
I'm sorry?
And no one had an issue with that.
It looks like some people did and some didn't. But for example, I'm going to call out a hypocrisy.
Please.
Lots of Americans like to say, well, if we would just study the classics, they're not assigning Plato. They're assigning parts of Plato, but they're not assigning
that whole
the
thing
parts
where he's falling in love with the boy that's handsome coming in and all that stuff, right? Remember that?
Right. That's the ancient world. It is just different. And in Revelation, there's a lot of sort of weirdness around gender that I write about, and I'm interested in that, trying to understand Revelation. But I think I'm doing some of my own therapy. I'm straight. I grew up in North Alabama. You had to play football. You had to be good at it.
Right.
All of that. But I think that I inherited some notions about masculinity that made it hard for me just to be more human.
Right.
And so in my own experience, one of the things I've learned from LGBT Christians is not that I'm not gay curious. I'm not, that's my experience. But what I have found is I don't have to be wrapped into this script that has sometimes caught me in bad situations.
I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me. And so when he's using the author of Revelation, things like Jezebel, Babylon, I've been accused in my life of having a Jezebel spirit.
Wow.
On actually more than one occasion.
I know what that means. Yes.
So what's going on? Is that a proper use of this concept from Book of Revelation? From, what's going on when the author is using this imagery?
I can't make everything about Revelation okay. And I don't try to. When John talks about Jezebel and he describes Rome or Babylon as a prostitute, he's using language from the Hebrew prophets, right? This is the language you use when you say Israel is being unfaithful to God. You talk about sexual promiscuity. You talk about adultery. Right. And he uses that language. The other kind of language he uses for women there's a mother giving birth, the woman clothed with the sun. There's a bride who is pure and adorned for her husband. And the only way women figure in Revelation are either sexually wrong, motherly, and virginal, like a bride. And that just rules out, if we think about even the Gospels, the rest of the New Testament, all kinds of women who had all kinds of other roles. Right. The only way John describes them are in these ways that, again, they're there in the prophets. They're also there in Greco-Roman literature and imagery. So, I think it's important to acknowledge. And then I would add that John sees the prostitute. It's amazing. First of all, she looks really glamorous, adorned, right? Precious stones, jewels. And she's got this golden cup. And then he says, yeah, but she was drunk with the blood of the saints. And it's like all this opulence that Rome has generated, it's just corrupt and vile. And he gives a list. I can tell you the verses 18, 12, and 13 of all the luxury items that she has produced for Rome. And it all comes down. It all gets destroyed.
So that's a great segue, because I wanted to explore that a little bit in Revelation 18. The commercial language, the use of this almost consumer idolatry that is being criticized. What How does that help us with like we typically don't think about the Bible as an economics book, although I know we talk about giving and all. That's what people love to talk about, giving from the Bible, and I get that. But what's the critique here? We don't typically talk about what Revelation 18 says about money. What is it saying about money?
Yeah. And even in chapter 13 with the beast, no one can buy or sell if they don't have the beast mark.
Right.
It's, I think, essentially that Rome takes the resources of all these territories it's conquered and dominates, strips them away, and sends them to Rome, where a very few people live fabulously opulent lifestyles. And I think that critique is not rare in the Bible. The Bible doesn't give us an economic system. It doesn't tell us how to run the world, economics or government. But it does have a critique of people who live in luxury at the expense of other people. And in the ancient world, that was a very real thing. Economies didn't grow in the ancient world. If one person had it all, somebody else didn't. And the vast majority of the population was barely, when I say getting by, I don't mean making their rent. I mean surviving. So
meaning like
that critique,
food.
That is a biblical critique. Revelation is right in line with Exodus and Leviticus and the prophets about it. In line with Jesus, with the parable of the rich man and Lazarus. I don't know what a political economy should look like. That's not it. I do know I'm opposed to a world where some people have everything and most people don't have enough to live in security or dignity.
What a powerful, powerful message and powerful critique. It's so hard. Like, I remember the moment, let me just back. I remember, maybe not the moment, but I remember the process, I should say, of moving from thinking, oh man, I'm the protagonist in every part of the Bible.
Sure.
To realizing, man, I might be the antagonist. Or with the antagonist, or I might be on the side of the Pharisees with this. I probably would be a Pharisee, or whatever it may be. It really is hard to take the critique that the Bible is trying to give us. But man, I think it's so important. It's so important. We just deceive ourselves into thinking that God just wants us to get rich, to have everything we want, and to think nothing of others. And of course, we wouldn't say that, but that's like the implication. Like, it's about, I can't tell you how many things I see in ways Scripture is used just to say, I see it all the time on social media. Oh, God blesses this, or this Proverbs 31 woman, or whatever, and I'm getting all this money, and it's just about them making money.
It's really contrary to the way of Jesus. But I think more helpful, I'm not coming at this from a judgmental position. I'm in the same system with the same things, right? I'm making the same decisions. What you were talking about just a minute, Josh, a wise friend once said, we could read the Bible or we can let the Bible read us.
Yeah.
And you were letting the Bible read you.
Yeah. It's what I want to do. I think one of the worst things we've done is we've allowed the critical thinking and proper interpretation of the Bible to just go completely by the wayside. And maybe we never did have it. I don't know. But it's like, I just can't believe the things that people are believing right now in the name of Jesus.
I was listening to sermons last year, making charts of them, of how the Bible was used. And almost all of it was verses taken out of context, individual verses, So if you're taking it from 1 Corinthians, well, that's part of a letter. If it's John or Genesis, it's part of a story. And so I agree with you that even some of us who can quote verses all day long, way more than I can, and I read the Bible for money, that doesn't mean they're engaging the Bible.
It does not mean that at all. And one of my hopes and prayers for this show and for anything that I'm putting out there, because I definitely feel a call to bring things out that are helping people really read the Bible. I hear so many things about, well, that person is so biblical. And again, what I think is meant by that is that they quote the Bible a lot, or they say it, or even they read it, which is a very good thing to do. Please don't ever hear me say,
no,
don't read the Bible. Read the Bible as much as you can. What bothers me, though, is that just because someone has a bunch of scripture references doesn't mean they're quoting it in context, doesn't mean they're giving you an accurate view of that. And we've lost discernment. We think that, oh, they said it, they sound smart, they sound convicted, and they sound convinced, they must know something I don't. Or whatever it is that happens inside. And no, let's take on the Bereans, not the Thessalonians, right? Or whatever it is, where they were more honorable, right? Or because what do? They examined the scriptures. And I think that that's just so important. Greg, this has been such an awesome conversation. Here's kind of my last big question. What are you hoping is what message do you want this book to send to the people that read it, and the people, then the pastors that say a pastor reads it, they get it. And then what is your hope that happens from that?
So
after they get it?
Thank you. Thank you for asking that question. There are a lot of little things, I hope, because each chapter of the book is on a different subject. The main thing I hope is that Christians, and especially pastors and scholars, but all of us, would realize that Revelation is a part of the Bible that can speak to us and challenge us here and now. If that could come through, most churches ignore it. A lot of churches abuse it.
Yes, that's a great way to put it.
But not many churches pause with it.
I love that. It makes me want to do a series on it.
Have at it.
Teach it.
Have at it. And there are a lot of great little teaching guides out there. Yeah. I wrote one, but I could name David De Silva and Robin Whitaker.
I love David De Silva.
I read a manuscript of his yesterday. It's brilliant.
It's so cool. I'm going to reach out to him and see if he'll come on the show and talk some about some of this stuff. I mean, the stuff about honor culture, the stuff, it's so helpful to understand the New Testament. And we just take it so out of context when we don't understand some of the things that they're dealing with.
He knows so much more. Gosh. Yeah.
It's just amazing. Well, I appreciate so much, Greg, that you spent some time with me. Thanks for spending some time with our audience. How can people, is there a preferred vendor for the book? And what's next? How can people get involved? Is there something with it? Do you have another book coming out that you want to let people know, that you're going to start working on?
In terms of this book, you can find it anywhere but a bookstore, pretty much. So I use bookshop.org. You can use Amazon. You can order it straight from Eerdmans. I bet they would love that.
Yes.
And that would be wonderful. The book that I've been working on that I don't know if I'm going to get to finish is about hope. And the reason I don't know if I'll get to finish is I just moved from teaching to administration. And Josh, I'm going to die from Google Docs and Zoom meetings. So I don't know if I'll have the time,
can imagine.
But I'm really interested in what does hope really mean as opposed to just, I think it'll get better. What does it really mean in a Christian context?
I love that. Well, Greg, thank you so much for jumping on the program. It's been such a pleasure to have this conversation with you. And just again, thanks for your work and for getting things out there that we can look at, read, and really wrestle with. I think it's awesome.
I have enjoyed this a lot, Josh. Thank you so much for the chance.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And to our viewers, guys, thanks for jumping in. Make sure you like, subscribe, do those things that hack the algorithm. We need it. We want to get things out there because there's a lot of craziness out there. And at least here, we're trying to really get you good content you can wrestle with. You can decide for yourself. Think about it. Get the book. We're going to put links and all that in the show notes. And until next time, guys, take care. God bless. And we'll see you then.